3 years, zero songs written. That's how long it had been since Ji-Hoon had created anything worth finishing. 3 years of pretending he was simply taking a break. 3 years of watching other producers make hit records while his own studio sat silent. Then one ordinary housekeeper, dusting his shelves, hummed four forgotten bars she never expected anyone to hear. And before she'd even finished the melody, something inside him that had been silent for 3 years came back to life. She didn't know his name. She definitely didn't know she'd just changed his life with a song her late father used to play in a tiny record shop half a world away. Before we begin, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city below. Selah Whitfield grew up believing a record shop could hold a whole neighborhood together, because for the first 18 years of her life, hers did. Whitfield Sound sat on a corner in southwest Atlanta that her father had rented before she was born and never once let go of. Not through two recessions, not through the year the block around it got torn up for construction, not through anything. She fell asleep most nights to the low hum of vinyl drifting up through the floorboards from the shop below. Her father's voice threaded through it, debating pressing dates and album conditions with regulars who'd been coming in since before she could walk. He died on a Tuesday in March, quietly, in his sleep, the kind of ending that felt almost unfair in how little drama it offered for a man who'd spent his whole life making noise other people loved. Selah kept the shop running out of instinct more than plan, restocking the same bins, keeping the same hours, telling herself grief was just something you work through one open sign at a time. 2 years later, a certified letter told her otherwise. Her father, it turned out, had been quietly underwater on the building for the better part of a decade, borrowing small and often to keep the doors open, never once mentioning it to her because that was exactly the kind of man he'd been. The kind who'd rather carry a weight alone than let his daughter see him struggling to lift it. The notice gave her 4 months before the auction. 4 months to raise more money than she'd ever held in her life, or watch the one physical piece of her father left in the world get sold off in pieces to strangers who wouldn't know a first pressing from a reissue. She found the placement agency the way most desperate good ideas get found, at 2 in the morning, scrolling with the specific hopelessness of someone who has already priced out every conventional option. A year of live-in domestic work for a private household in Seoul, generous pay, full contract sum released at the end, more money in 12 months than she could save in 5 years behind the counter of a record shop that was hemorrhaging money it didn't have. You don't speak a word of Korean, her best friend Dre said, sitting on the edge of Selah's half-packed suitcase, like sitting on it might physically stop her from going. You've never left the country. You're about to move in with strangers on the other side of the world because of a spreadsheet. I'm about to save Daddy's shop, Selah said, which wasn't really an answer, and they both knew it, and neither of them said anything else about it after that. The Moon Estate sat behind gates tall enough to swallow the evening sky whole, at the end of a long drive lined with trees so precisely maintained they looked almost unreal. The car that brought her from the airport had driven nearly an hour to get there, and by the time it slowed to a stop, Selah had run out of ways to convince herself she wasn't completely out of her depth. A woman was waiting at the entrance, dressed in a suit sharp enough to cut something, her expression giving away exactly nothing. She looked Selah over with the unhurried thoroughness of someone conducting an inspection rather than a greeting. "You're the new placement," the woman said. It wasn't a question. "I am Seo Kyung-moon. I run this household. Breakfast service begins at 7, without exception. I have no patience for lateness, and even less for excuses attached to it. Understood, ma'am. We'll see. Seo Kyung turned without waiting to see if Selah followed. This family has built something over 3 generations that a great many people would very much like to see us fail at. I do not allow carelessness near that. Not from staff, not from anyone. Selah followed her through hallways that seemed to multiply the longer she walked them, taking in more marble and quiet, expensive stillness than she'd encountered in her entire life combined, and told herself silently that 4 months of tuition-grade discomfort was a small price for the alternative. She met him on her third night, though not in any way either of them would have called a meeting. She'd been asked to clean the East Wing study, a room she'd been told belonged to the young master, delivered in the same flat tone the staff used for anything they'd rather not elaborate on. The room was lined, floor to ceiling, with sound equipment she didn't fully recognize, mixing boards and speakers, and a wall of framed records that made her breath catch despite herself. An entire career's worth of hit singles with a single production credit repeated across nearly all of them. Ji-Hoon. She hadn't meant to hum. It happened the way it always happened. Unconsciously, her father's favorite pressing, running through her head the way it did most days, when her hands were busy and her mind wandered somewhere it missed. She was 3 bars into it, dusting a shelf of awards she didn't recognize the names on, when a voice from the doorway nearly stopped her heart. "What is that?" She turned fast enough to nearly knock a trophy off its shelf. A man stood in the doorway, dark hair, tired eyes, dressed like someone who'd forgotten he owned anything besides black. He wasn't looking at her the way Seo Kyung had, like an inspection. He was looking at her like she'd said something in a language he'd forgotten he still understood. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize anyone was—" "What song is that?" he said again, quieter this time, like the question actually mattered to him. "I don't recognize it, and I recognize everything." "It's not really a song anyone would know," Selah said carefully. "My father used to press it himself. Small independent thing. I don't even think it ever got a proper release outside his shop." Something crossed his face, complicated and fast, gone before she could read it fully. "Do it again." "Sir." The humming. "Do it again. Please." She felt foolish doing it, standing in a stranger's study with a duster still in one hand, but something in the plain, unguarded way he'd asked made refusing feel almost unkind. She hummed the first few bars again, softer this time, watching his face rather than the shelf in front of her. He closed his eyes. "I haven't wanted to write anything in 3 years," he said, so quietly she almost missed it, like the sentence had escaped before he'd fully decided to let it out. "Not one note, and you just hum 4 bars of something I've never heard, and some part of my brain that's been completely silent for 3 years just woke all the way up." Selah didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing, standing very still in a room full of records that weren't hers, while a man she'd known for exactly 90 seconds looked at her like she'd handed him something he'd stopped believing he was ever getting back. "If this hook's already got you leaning in, don't go anywhere. I promise this one earns every minute of what's coming. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight." "I should finish the room," Selah said finally, because someone had to say something, and the silence had started to feel like it belonged to a different kind of story than the one she'd signed up for. "Right, of course." Ji-Hoon stepped back from the doorway, though something in his posture suggested it cost him more than it should have. "What's your name?" "Selah." "Selah," he repeated, like he was filing it somewhere he intended to keep it. "Thank you for the 4 bars." She finished dusting the study in a silence that felt entirely different from the one she'd walked in with, aware in some quiet corner of herself she didn't fully trust yet, that something in this house had just shifted, and that 4 months was starting to feel like a considerably more complicated number than it had a day ago. Days folded into a rhythm Selah hadn't expected to find inside a house that cold. Breakfast at 7, the household's particular hush settling over everything by mid-morning, and somewhere in the middle of it, small pockets of something that almost felt like ease. She found her first real ally in Yoon-hee, the head housekeeper, a woman somewhere in her 50s who'd worked for the Moon family longer than Ji-Hoon had been alive, and had opinions about all of it she rarely spent on anyone who hadn't earned them yet. "You hummed in his study," Yoon-hee said on Selah's 5th morning. Not quite a question, sliding a plate of rice and banchan across the small staff table like it was nothing. Selah froze mid-bite. "Is that a problem?" "No one's hummed anything in this house in 3 years." Yoon-hee's expression gave away very little, though something in her eyes suggested she'd been waiting a long time for someone to. "You should know what you're standing next to before you decide whether to be careful about it." "What happened to him?" Yoon-hee was quiet for a moment, weighing how much of it was hers to hand over. "A producer he trusted took an album he'd written top to bottom and put his own name on half of it. Won an award for it. Young Master Ji-Hoon never said a word publicly, just stopped writing." She shrugged, small and tired. "Some people get robbed of money. He got robbed of wanting to make anything again. I always thought that one was worse." Selah turned that over for the rest of the morning, the shape of a grief that didn't look like grief from the outside, tucked behind expensive silence and a room full of other people's awards. She saw him again 2 days later, later than she should have still been up, drawn out of the staff quarters by a sound she almost didn't recognize at first because it had been absent from the house the entire time she'd worked there. Music. Coming from the East Wing study, faint but unmistakable. A melody built loosely, imperfectly, around 4 bars she recognized instantly as her own. She shouldn't have gone. She went anyway, standing just outside the cracked door, watching Ji-Hoon hunched over a keyboard with the particular intensity of someone who'd forgotten what it felt like to want something and was relearning the shape of it in real time. He caught her reflection in the dark window before she could retreat. "You're spying on me." "I heard music," Selah said, not bothering to deny the rest of it. "First time since I got here." "First time in 3 years, according to everyone downstairs, I assume." He didn't sound annoyed. If anything, something in his posture had loosened, the guarded stiffness from their first meeting worn down just slightly. "Come in. Tell me if it's terrible. I don't trust my own judgment on this anymore." "I'm not a music person, sir. I just sell records. There's a difference." "You know the difference between a first pressing and a reissue by the weight of the sleeve. I watched you check 3 of my father's records that way without thinking about it. You're a music person. You just don't get paid like one." Selah found herself smiling despite every instinct telling her this was exactly the kind of comfortable she couldn't afford to get. "Play it again, from the top." He did, and it wasn't terrible. Rough in places, unfinished, but real in a way that made something in her chest ache a little on his behalf. And when he finished, he looked at her the way a man looks at someone He's about to ask for something he isn't sure he's allowed to want. Would you hum it with me sometime? The original. I want to hear where it actually came from before I keep bending it into something else. I don't work in this wing, sir. Somebody's going to notice. Let them notice, Ji-Hoon said, quieter than before. I haven't cared what anybody in this house noticed about me in 3 years. I find I mostly still don't. If you're already rooting for these two, tell me in the comments and stick around because this house has more people in it than just the ones being kind to her. That particular ease didn't last unnoticed for long. Seo Kyung found Selah in the hallway outside the East Wing 4 days later, arms folded, expression unreadable in the way Selah had learned meant she'd already decided something and was only waiting for the right moment to say it out loud. You've been spending time in my son's study. He asked me to, ma'am. I didn't seek it out. I'm sure that's exactly how it felt to you. Seo Kyung's voice stayed level, cool, entirely without heat, which somehow made it land harder than shouting would have. Let me be plain with you, since I suspect plainness is the only language that will actually reach you. My son is engaged. The wedding will be announced within the month to a woman whose family has stood beside this one for 2 generations. That arrangement is not a preference. It is a structural necessity for a company carrying obligations you cannot begin to understand from where you're standing. She studied Selah for a long, cold moment. Whatever this is, whatever it's starting to feel like to either of you, I need you to understand it ends the moment it becomes inconvenient for this family, and it will. Selah kept her spine straight, refusing to let the words land the way they were clearly meant to. I came here to earn money for my father's shop, ma'am. Nothing more. I'm not interested in complicating anyone's engagement. See that you aren't, Seo Kyung said, already turning to go, though something in the set of her shoulders suggested the conversation had cost her more composure than she'd meant to spend. At the end of the hallway, she paused, not quite turning back. For what it's worth, I don't think you're lying to me. I think you simply don't yet understand how little that will matter. She left Selah standing alone in a hallway that suddenly felt considerably colder than it had a moment ago, the word engaged sitting heavy and unfamiliar in her chest. And it was 3 full days before Selah worked up the nerve to ask Yoon-hee, carefully over breakfast, exactly who the fiancé was. Jang Aryam, Yoon-hee said, not looking up from the rice she was portioning. Her father runs the distribution company that gets every Moon Entertainment release into stores across 3 countries. Smart woman, ambitious. I've met her twice. A pause, weighed carefully. She's not cruel from what I've seen, but she spent 2 years planning a wedding around a man who's never once looked at her the way he apparently looked at you over 4 bars of somebody's dead father's favorite song. Selah set down her spoon, appetite gone entirely. That's not fair to either of us. No, Yoon-hee agreed. It rarely is in houses like this one. The following Saturday, Ji-Hoon found her in the shop of records nobody in that house had ever bothered to catalog properly, a back room he'd apparently forgotten existed until curiosity got the better of him. Tucked behind the formal listening lounge his father had built for guests who cared more about the room looking impressive than about what played in it. You found the good ones, Selah said, not looking up from the crate she was sorting. Second pressings mixed carelessly in with reissues like nobody had touched them in a decade. Somebody in this family used to actually love music. This isn't a collection somebody bought to look tasteful. My grandfather. Ji-Hoon crouched down across from her, studying the crate with something between nostalgia and surprise. He started the label out of a garage. I don't think anyone's touched these since he passed. That's a crime, honestly. Selah held one up, checking the sleeve weight out of habit before she'd even registered she was doing it in front of him again. This is a first pressing. Somebody paid real money for this once, and it's been sitting in a crate collecting dust behind a room built for show. Is that what my father's shop was too? Ji-Hoon asked, quieter, watching her hands rather than the record. Something real, hiding behind something built for show? Selah's hands stilled. My father's shop was never hiding behind anything. It was small and it was real, and everybody who walked through that door knew exactly what it was. She set the record down carefully. That's actually the opposite of what happens in houses like this one, if I'm honest, sir. Everything real gets tucked in the back room. Everything for show gets the lounge with good lighting. Something in his face shifted, a little raw, a little caught out. You can stop calling me sir when we're back here. I don't think either of us is being honest with the other one if you keep doing that. That feels like a bad idea. Probably, Ji-Hoon agreed. I've had a lot of bad ideas since you started humming in my study. I'm finding I don't mind them as much as I used to. They spent the better part of 2 hours in that back room, Selah teaching him things about the records his own grandfather had built a company around. Ji-Hoon playing her fragments of the melody he'd been working on, both of them circling something neither one said out loud. And it was only when Yoon-hee found them there, well past the hour Selah should have been anywhere near that wing, that either of them noticed how much time had actually passed. Madam Jang will be arriving within the hour, Yoon-hee said, addressing Ji-Hoon directly, though her eyes flicked once, briefly, towards Selah with something that might have been warning or might have been sympathy. Your mother asks that you be dressed and downstairs before she does. Ji-Hoon's easy posture from the last 2 hours folded back into something more careful, more composed, the version of himself Selah recognized from the first night. Right, of course. Ariam Jang arrived precisely on time, the way Selah imagined she did most things, sweeping into the main hall in a coat that probably cost more than the entire crate of records Selah had spent the afternoon sorting. She was, Selah noted with the specific clarity of someone bracing for arrival and finding something more complicated instead, not unkind looking at all. Sharp, yes. Composed, certainly. But there was something tired underneath the polish. The particular fatigue of a woman who'd been managing an arrangement for 2 years and had gotten very good at not letting the managing show. You must be the new placement, Ariam said, catching Selah in the hallway on her way to the formal sitting room, pausing just long enough to make it clear the pause was deliberate. Yoon-hee mentioned you, the one from Atlanta. Yes, ma'am. Ariam studied her for a moment, unhurried, not unkind exactly, but thorough in a way that made Selah feel entirely seen. Ji-Hoon's been humming, she said finally, for the first time in 3 years according to his mother, who mentioned it to me like it was good news. Something flickered behind her eyes, quick and complicated. I should be glad about that. I find I mostly am. I just hadn't expected the reason for it to be quite so easy to place, standing right here in this hallway. Selah didn't have a ready answer for that, and Ariam didn't seem to expect one, already moving past her toward the sitting room, though she paused once more at the doorway. "For what it's worth," she said, not turning around, "I don't think badly of you. I think you're exactly where circumstance put you, doing exactly what anyone in your position would do. I just need you to understand that I've spent 2 years building something out of an arrangement neither of us chose freely, and I'm not interested in watching it come apart because a man finally remembered how to feel something. 3 months before I'm supposed to walk down an aisle my own father's company is depending on." She disappeared into the sitting room before Selah could respond, and Selah stood alone in the hallway for a long moment, turning over the uncomfortable, complicated truth that the woman she'd been quietly dreading meeting was not a villain in any way she recognized, just another person trapped inside the same cold architecture, fighting for something that mattered to her for reasons that had nothing to do with cruelty. If you're already feeling for more than one person in this story, tell me in the comments. I want to know who you're rooting for right now, because I promise it's about to get a lot more complicated. Dinner that evening was a careful, polished performance. Seo-kyung presiding over it with the particular satisfaction of a woman watching a plan proceed exactly as designed. Ji-Hoon seated beside Ariam with the practiced ease of 2 years of similar dinners, and Selah, serving alongside the rest of the staff, found herself watching him from across the room with an ache she hadn't fully let herself name until she saw him sitting there, easy and composed, beside a woman his whole family had already chosen for him. He caught her eye once, briefly, across the table, something apologetic and uncertain passing between them before he looked away first. Later that night, long after the dinner had ended and the house had settled into its usual heavy quiet, Selah found a folded note slipped beneath the door of the staff quarters. Ji-Hoon's handwriting, hurried and plain. "Back room, if you're still awake. I have something to play you. I think I finally finished it." She stood there a long moment, note in hand, weighing every reason she had to leave it exactly where it was and go to sleep like a woman with better sense than to walk towards something this complicated. She went anyway. Ji-Hoon was cross-legged on the floor between two crates, laptop balanced on his knee, nervous in a way Selah hadn't seen from him before. The song filled the small room, built around her 4 bars but fuller now, aching and hopeful underneath. "It's about," he started, then caught himself. "Inspired by. I want to be careful with the word." "You can just say about," Selah said. "I think we're past pretending otherwise." He leaned in slowly enough that she had every chance to stop it. "Well, isn't this a scene?" Yoon-hee stood in the doorway, arms crossed, one eyebrow perfectly arched. They jerked apart with the particular guilty speed of two people caught doing nothing that could be proven in court. "You two are about as subtle as a wedding announcement in a newspaper. Fix your faces before you leave separately. 10 minutes apart, minimum. I mean it." Selah's phone buzzed the moment Yoon-hee left, an Atlanta number lighting the screen. Her aunt's voice, tight and apologetic. "They moved the date, the bank, some new policy, some backlog. You don't have 4 months anymore. You've got 7 weeks, and that's if nothing else goes wrong." Selah stood in the hallway of a house that had, for one evening, started to feel almost like somewhere she could breathe, and felt the floor of her actual plan drop out from underneath her all over again. Don't go anywhere. This house isn't the only thing about to get complicated. Tell me in the comments, do you think she tells Ji-Hoon what just happened, or does she carry it alone the way she's carried everything else? Selah didn't tell him that night. She thought about Aryam's tired honesty in the hallway, about Seo Kyung's warning, about how quickly a woman who told a rich man her problems started looking to everyone else in a house like that one, like a woman angling for a rescue. She went back to the staff quarters instead and didn't sleep much. The next morning, Yoon-hee found her scrubbing an already clean countertop hard enough to pale her knuckles and told her gently that she didn't have to carry things alone in that house just because she was staff. Before Selah could answer, Seo Kyung's voice summoned the household to the main hall for an announcement. Standing at the top of the staircase with Ji-Hoon and Aryam a step below her, Seo Kyung announced the engagement would be formally declared at the company's anniversary gala in 3 weeks. Her eyes moved once, briefly, to Selah in the back of the room before returning to the crowd. Ji-Hoon's expression stayed carefully composed, effort rather than ease, and when his eyes found Selah's for just a second, something passed between them that had nothing to do with the announcement and everything to do with the 7 weeks she still hadn't told him about. 3 weeks. A collapsing timeline on one side of the world, a wedding announcement closing in on the other, and Selah standing exactly in the middle of both with no clean way out of either. If you're feeling the walls closing in on her right along with me, let me know in the comments and tell me honestly, do you think 3 weeks is enough time for any of this to fall apart the right way? Selah didn't tell him, choosing instead to protect him from one more complication in a week already full of them. That evening, sorting a box of her father's things, she found a test pressing he'd kept wrapped in cloth her whole life and never explained. She spent the night chasing the thread of what it might be worth, grateful for anything that wasn't waiting for a clock to run out. 3 days later, Yoon-hee announced at staff breakfast that Ji-Hoon had been asked to perform something new at the gala, first original material in 3 years, and made no secret of exactly what she suspected was behind his sudden inspiration. Ji-Hoon, cornered by Selah in the back room, admitted his fear plainly. The moment he played 4 bars in front of his mother's entire board, everyone would ask where it came from, and he didn't have an answer that didn't put her name in a sentence he wasn't allowed to say out loud. "Write it," Selah told him. "Just don't tell anyone what it's about. Some things get to stay yours a little longer before the rest of the world decides what they mean." It was Aryam who saw them, catching the tail end of a look through the back room's open door that lasted a beat too long. She said nothing for 3 days, carrying it the way she seemed to carry everything, quietly and without cruelty, until she finally found Selah alone on a terrace the night before the gala. "I don't think badly of you," she said. "I think you're exactly where circumstance put you. I just need you to understand I've spent 2 years building something out of an arrangement neither of us chose freely, and I'm not interested in watching it come apart because a man finally remembered how to feel something." The gala arrived in a blaze of lights. Selah pressed into service at its edges, and when Ji-Hoon stepped up to the small stage with a guitar, his eyes found hers across the room for a fraction of a second. "This is something new. I haven't written anything in 3 years. I'm not going to explain where this one came from. I don't think I need to." The first 4 bars filled the ballroom, unmistakable, and across the room Selah watched Seo Kyung's satisfied expression falter as something in her face began, very quietly, to add things up. If you think Seo Kyung's about to figure it out in real time, you're not wrong. Tell me in the comments what you think she does next, because this gala's about to get a lot less celebratory. The applause nearly drowned the last note. Seo Kyung steered Ji-Hoon into a quiet alcove, And though Selah couldn't hear the words, the ice in her composure said enough. Ariam found Selah minutes later, confirming Ji-Hoon had told his mother the song wasn't about anyone, then admitted, watching the room, that the near miss had clarified quite a lot for her. I'm not calling anything off tonight, but I'm not planning on standing at that altar in 3 weeks, pretending I don't know what I know either. Well past midnight, Selah passed Seo-kyung's study and heard her on the phone, voice low and controlled. I don't care what it costs. I want everything on her. Employment history, references, anything at all before the week is out. Quietly. I want to know exactly who's standing in my son's studio before I decide what happens next. Tell me you caught that too. She's not just suspicious anymore. She's building a file. Drop a comment if you think she's looking for the truth or looking for a reason. The report came back clean 4 days later, nothing to find, and Yoon-hee reported So-kyung's fury with open delight over breakfast. A woman like Madam Moon doesn't go looking for information because she's curious. She goes looking because she needs a reason. And right now, you've stubbornly refused to provide her with one. Ji-Hoon confirmed it that evening in the archive, admitting he'd told his mother plainly the song was his, and she needed to let it go. It was there Selah finally told him about the auction, moved up to 7 weeks, revealed the same night he'd played her the first draft. He was hurt she'd carried it alone, and asked simply to be someone she told things to before the deadline was already on top of her. 3 days after that, Yoon-hee noticed something wasn't right. Security logs showing someone had accessed the studio's file server twice, late, after everyone should have been asleep. 2 hours later, the answer arrived the worst way possible. An unreleased demo, leaked in full, credited to an unnamed source close to the family. Ji-Hoon found Selah in the kitchen, pale, phone in hand. Seo-kyung was already there ahead of him, a printed security log in hand, expression colder and more final than Selah had seen since the first night. I have a login accessing the studio server at 1:47 this morning from a device registered to staff quarters room 4. That's your room. I did warn you she was building a file. Tell me in the comments if you think Selah's actually about to get blamed for something she didn't do, because this is the moment everything tips over. Selah protested she'd been asleep, that someone could have used her login or spoofed the room number. How convenient that the explanation is always someone else, somewhere unprovable, Seo-kyung said. Ji-Hoon argued a room number on a spreadsheet wasn't proof, that his mother was choosing the convenient story. Seo-kyung, composure cracking for just a second before smoothing back down, cited a leaked demo on every entertainment site in the country, 12 hours before an engagement announcement, and the timing being more than convenient. You're relieved of your position, effective immediately, Seo-kyung said. Full contract pay will be honored, but you cannot stay in this house while it's unresolved. This is not punishment. This is containment. Selah, understanding the whole shape of the last few weeks collapsing in real time, told Ji-Hoon not to fight it, that it would only make things worse, and told Seo-kyung plainly, I didn't do this. Someday you'll find out I didn't, and I hope it costs you something when you do. Ji-Hoon caught her at the gate before the car pulled away. This isn't over. Find whoever actually did this. Yoon-hee pressed the test pressing into her hands through the window, having had it appraised while Selah was busy having a crisis. You are the least boring, least guilty person to walk through that gate in 19 years. Don't you dare let one bad week convince you otherwise. I know that one hurt. Tell me in the comments if you think Ji-Hoon actually lets her walk out that door. Because I promise you, this isn't over. Not even close. 6 weeks later, Whitfield Sound was still standing. The test pressing turned out to be a lost regional Seoul session, valuable enough on its own to clear the debt with room to spare. Selah told herself that was the ending. Dre wasn't buying it, watching her rearrange an already organized shelf for the fourth time and avoid 40 missed calls from a Korean area code. You've been tired in a way that isn't just jet lag for weeks now, and cranky about smells, which, forgive me, is new. Selah's sentence died in her throat as several disconnected pieces of the last month violently rearranged themselves into a single unavoidable shape. I need to go to the pharmacy. Right now. I promise I'm not dragging this out for fun. Tell me in the comments what you think she finds out and stick around, because the next part moves fast. The test confirmed it. Dre, gentle but firm, told her she was telling him, just not today. Back in Seoul, Ji-Hoon had stopped writing again, from something angrier this time, and Ariam had started appearing at the estate more than an indefinite pause engagement required. Yoon-hee, self-appointed head of what she called Operation Actually Find Out What Happened, presented a theory to Ariam in the kitchen. Director Yoo, the producer who'd stolen credit from Ji-Hoon 3 years earlier, whose own numbers had been sliding since, with clear motive to sabotage a genuine comeback. Server logs pulled via a favor from an IT friend showed his credentials accessing the studio server the same night as the leak, from an office 2 floors from where the household log supposedly originated. Yoon-hee let slip in her excitement that Selah was pregnant, information she'd gotten from a customs agent cousin. Ariam, resolute, requested an official meeting with the IT department under her father's company letterhead, wanting the metadata documented before anyone had a chance to quietly fix it. Tell me you're rooting for Yoon-hee and Ariam's very unlikely detective duo as hard as I am, and let me know in the comments if you think they crack this before Selah even finds the nerve to make her own call. Dre found Selah on the back steps 2 evenings later. Ji-Hoon's contact pulled up and unanswered for 20 minutes. You flew across the planet on a spreadsheet, Selah. You can make one phone call. Selah thought about what her father would have said about all of it, that anything worth keeping is usually a little dented before it's worth anything, and finally picked the phone back up. 6,000 miles away, Ariam stood in Seo Kyung's study with a folder of printouts, laying out unambiguous metadata. Director Yu's access logs had been altered after the fact, his actual access predating the household log by 9 minutes. He hadn't just leaked the song, he'd built the frame in advance. Ji-Hoon, saying he needed to call her immediately, had his phone ring in his hand before he finished the sentence, Selah's name lighting the screen for the first time in 42 days. The whole room went still. Ji-Hoon answered on the fourth ring. I know it wasn't you, it was Director Yu. Ariam just proved it with actual server metadata sitting on my mother's desk right now. You were never the problem, Selah. Selah, overwhelmed, blurted the rest before she could stop herself. I'm pregnant. Dead silence, then his voice thick with something between a laugh and tears. I'm booking a flight tonight. I found out a few days ago, she said. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you for exactly that long, and then you called with an entire exoneration, and I panicked and it just came out. That is genuinely the best possible way for something like this to come out. Seo Kyung summoned Director Yu to her office. He read the printout, composure holding for almost 4 seconds before it didn't, protesting the metadata could have been corrupted. Arium revealed an independent firm had already verified it separately. 3 years you sat across from me in board meetings, having stolen credit for my son's work, Seo Kyung said, colder than Selah had ever heard her aimed at anyone. And when he finally found his way back to writing again, your solution was to frame an innocent woman for a crime you committed to protect a career you'd already built on a lie. You're finished here, effective tonight. He's on a plane by morning. Tell me in the comments if you think Selah's ready for what happens when he actually shows up. Because I promise you, this next one's worth staying for. Ji-Hoon arrived at Whitfield Sound jet-lagged, guitar case over one shoulder, a flat wrap package in hand. I heard you humming through the door. I stood outside for a full minute working up the nerve. He'd had the song pressed properly on vinyl before he left. 3 copies only, one for the shop. Selah peeled back the paper to find a plain white sleeve, hand-labeled, reading Selah's song. You didn't put your name on it. I put the name that actually mattered on it. I've had my name on plenty of things that didn't matter half as much. If you're feeling this reunion the way I felt writing it, let me know in the comments. And tell me, does Dre get to plan this wedding? Or does she have to fight Yoon-hee for the honor? Because I have a feeling that's its own whole story. 3 weeks later, Selah landed in Seoul, Ji-Hoon waiting with a deliberately terrible hand-lettered sign. Seo Kyung's thaw came in small, awkward increments rather than one grand scene. A car sent unasked with instructions to take the smoother route. A folder of prenatal research left on the counter signed only SKM. That's an apology, Yoon-hee translated. In Madam Moon, that is an extremely elaborate apology. The real conversation happened almost by accident in the kitchen one evening. I accused you of something you didn't do, and I did it because it was easier than admitting my son had built a life I hadn't planned for him. I am not a woman who apologizes easily. I want you to understand that isn't the same as not meaning it when I finally managed to. It wasn't warm exactly. It was honest and slow and considerably more trustworthy than anything faster would have been. Slow apologies hit different, don't they? Tell me in the comments if you're Team Yoon-hee's translation service, because I would absolutely need a subtitle track for that woman. Ji-Hoon, uncharacteristically nervous for 2 weeks, finally drove Selah to a small shop tucked between a shuttered bakery and a laundromat, string lights in the window, a sign reading Second Spin Records. I built it, somewhere for the archive stuff to actually live. I wanted to build something the way your father built his, not for show, for real. Inside, a section labeled Whitfield held records Dre had helped him select in secret, and behind the counter hung Selah's song, framed and lit. He dropped to one knee. You walked into my life humming 4 bars of a song that woke up something in me I genuinely stopped believing was still there. I don't want to build anything else without you standing exactly where you are right now. Selah Whitfield, will you marry me? Yes, obviously, completely, yes. Outside the window, Yoon-hee and Dre, who had coordinated the entire surprise across 2 continents for 3 weeks, cried openly and took full credit. Tell me you're not crying a little at Second Spin Records existing, and let me know in the comments, what should the wedding actually look like? Because I have a feeling this one's going to be worth waiting for. 8 months later, the wedding took place in the courtyard behind Whitfield Sound. String lights between old brick walls, folding chairs Yoon-hee insisted go in rows of 8 and not 7. Ariam, her own engagement long dissolved and now running her father's company on her own terms, helped Selah dress, calling herself family in a strange, true way families sometimes get built. The first dance opened on a 4-piece group built around Selah's father's original melody, dressed now in horns and harmony. Seo Kyung sat beside Selah's aunt, and when the music started, reached over and took her hand without seeming to decide to. If this is hitting you even half as hard as it hit me, do me a favor and smash that like button right now. It genuinely helps more than you'd think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is exactly the moment to do it, because I promise you don't want to miss what's still coming. A year later, Second Spin Records hosted its now monthly listening session, Ji-Hoon on sound, Selah digging crates, their daughter propped on her hip, gumming the corner of a record sleeve she had no business being that close to. Ji-Hoon played a recording he'd made weeks earlier through the shop speakers, their daughter's small off-key attempt at 4 familiar bars, layered under her own delighted laughter. "Some things just get passed down," Selah said quietly. "Whether anyone teaches them properly or not," Ji-Hoon agreed, resting his hand light over both of theirs at once. And that's the story. If you made it all the way here, drop a comment and tell me which moment hit you hardest. I read every single one of them. Please, please hit that like button if this one got you. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time, because there's a lot more where this came from, and I don't want you missing the next one. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.